Alva Bennett had spent most of her life trying to earn her mother's approval. Even at 34 years old, a part of her still hoped that one day Eleanor Bennett would look at her with warmth instead of criticism. But her mother had always loved perfection more than people. Expensive dresses, country club parties, polished smiles, wealthy friends, those things mattered to Eleanor. Feelings never did. On a rainy Friday evening, Alva stood inside her small apartment kitchen helping her 12-year-old daughter decorate cupcakes for a school fundraiser. The soft scent of vanilla and chocolate filled the room while old music played quietly from Alva's phone. Lily carefully placed pink frosting on a cupcake and smiled proudly. "Do you think Grandma will like these colors?" she asked. Alva looked over and forced a gentle smile. "Of course she will." Lily's eyes brightened instantly. "Maybe I can make some for her birthday party too." Alva's chest tightened slightly. Eleanor Bennett's 70th birthday party was only a week away, and the entire family had been talking about it for months. It was being held in the most expensive ballroom downtown with live musicians, crystal decorations, and over 200 guests. Eleanor treated the celebration like a royal event. Lily had been excited ever since the invitations arrived. And like Alva, Lily still believed her grandmother secretly loved her. The truth was harder. Ever since Alva's divorce 3 years earlier, Eleanor had treated her like a public embarrassment. Alva's ex-husband had left after years of debt and betrayal, leaving Alva alone to raise Lily while working double shifts at a publishing company. They survived, but Eleanor never missed an opportunity to remind Alva that she no longer lived the Bennett lifestyle. Still, Lily kept trying to win her grandmother's affection. That innocent hope broke Alva's heart more every year. Suddenly, Alva's phone rang on the counter. Lily immediately looked up. "Grandma?" Alva glanced at the screen and nodded slowly. Lily grinned. "Maybe she wants to talk about the party." Alva answered carefully. "Hi, Mom." Eleanor's voice came through cold and sharp as always. "I need to discuss something important." Alva leaned against the counter. "Okay, it's about the guest list." Alva instantly sensed trouble. "What about it?" There was a short pause before Eleanor spoke again. "I don't think Lily should attend." The words hit like ice water. Alva blinked. "Excuse me. She's too young for this kind of event," Eleanor said calmly. "The guests are important people, business owners, charity directors, politicians. I want the evening to remain sophisticated." Across the kitchen, Lily slowly stopped decorating cupcakes. Alva lowered her voice. "She's your granddaughter." "And you're my daughter," Eleanor replied sharply. "Yet you still managed to embarrass this family." Alva felt anger rise into her throat. "My divorce has nothing to do with Lily. Everything reflects on the family," Eleanor snapped. "People gossip, Alva. They notice things, your apartment, your financial problems, the public school." Lily looked down at the counter, pretending not to listen. Alva's stomach twisted painfully. "Mom," she whispered, "she can hear you. Then maybe it's time she learns that not every room is meant for everyone." Silence filled the kitchen. Only the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows remained. Alva looked at her daughter and saw tears forming in Lily's eyes. But the child tried desperately to hide them. That small, broken expression shattered something inside Alva forever. For years she had tolerated Eleanor's cruelty toward herself, the insults, the judgment, the constant disappointment in her mother's eyes. But nobody hurt Lily. Nobody. You can still come alone. Eleanor continued casually. It would look strange if my own daughter missed the event. Alva almost laughed at the cruelty of it. You really care more about appearances than your granddaughter. Oh, don't be dramatic, Eleanor replied. I'm protecting the atmosphere of the evening. Alva stared silently at the wall for several seconds. Then suddenly a memory flashed through her mind. Grandpa Walter lying in a hospital bed years ago. His weak hands pressing a folder into hers. His tired voice whispering, "One day your mother's pride will destroy her." Alva had never forgotten those words. At the time, she thought he was simply angry with Eleanor. Now she realized he had been warning her. Alva's voice became calm. Too calm. "You know what, Mom?" she said quietly. "You're right." Elinor sounded relieved. I'm glad you finally understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Without another word, Ava ended the call. The apartment fell silent. Lily stared at the floor while wiping her eyes quickly. It's okay, Mom, she whispered. I probably wouldn't fit in there anyway. Ava's heart broke completely. She walked across the kitchen and pulled her daughter into a tight hug. No, Ava whispered fiercely. Never say that again. Lily started crying softly against her shoulder. And as Ava held her daughter, another memory returned. The old wooden box hidden deep in her closet. The legal papers inside, the deed. For 7 years, Ava had ignored it because she still hoped her mother would change. But tonight changed everything. After Lily finally fell asleep, Ava quietly opened the closet and pulled down the dusty wooden box. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the papers again. Property ownership documents, signed legally, stamped officially. The mansion Elinor proudly called hers belonged to Ava, and for the first time in years Ava smiled. Ava barely slept that night. The storm outside had faded before midnight, but another storm continued inside her mind. She sat alone at the kitchen table while the apartment remained dark and silent around her. The old documents Grandpa Walter had given her years ago were spread carefully in front of her, the deed, the transfer papers, the signed will. Every page carried the same truth Elinor never expected anyone to reveal. The mansion legally belonged to Ava. For 7 years, she had hidden the secret from everyone, including Lily. At first, Ava told herself she stayed silent out of respect for Grandpa Walter's memory, but deep down, the real reason was much more painful. She had wanted a mother. Even after all the insults and humiliation, a small part of Ava still hoped Elinor would eventually change. She believed maybe grief after Grandpa's death had hardened her mother temporarily. Maybe time would soften her. Instead, Elinor became colder every year. Ava slowly picked up Grandpa Walter's handwritten letter from the box. The paper had yellowed with age, but his shaky handwriting remained clear. My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and your mother has likely pushed you further away than ever before. I know Elinor better than anyone. Pride matters more to her than love. Status matters more than family. That is why I am leaving the house to you. Not because I want revenge on my daughter, but because I want protection for you and Lily. One day, Elinor's choices will catch up to her. When that happens, do not destroy yourself trying to save her from consequences she created herself. Ava swallowed hard as tears filled her eyes. Her grandfather had always been the only person who truly saw her. After her divorce, when relatives whispered behind her back, Walter never judged her. He helped Ava pay Lily's school expenses quietly, and spent hours encouraging her when she felt like a failure. Meanwhile, Elinor only complained about how the divorce damaged the Bennet reputation. Ava folded the letter carefully and closed her eyes. Then she remembered Lily's face earlier that evening, the tears, the embarrassment, the heartbreak in a 12-year-old child trying to pretend she wasn't hurt. Something inside Ava finally settled. Her decision was made. The next morning, Lily sat quietly at the breakfast table, pushing cereal around her bowl. Usually she talked non-stop before school, but now the apartment felt painfully quiet. Ava placed pancakes in front of her daughter gently. You don't have to pretend you're okay, Ava said softly. Lily stared down at the table. I just don't understand what I did wrong. You did nothing wrong. Then, why doesn't Grandma want me around? Ava sat beside her slowly. Because your grandmother only values people who make her look important. The words burned inside her mind, but she couldn't say that to a child. Instead, Ava brushed Lily's hair behind her ear. Sometimes adults are broken in ways kids can't fix, she whispered. Lily looked up with watery eyes. Will she ever love me? Ava felt her throat tighten painfully. She should. Ava answered honestly. Because you're impossible not to love. Lily finally smiled a little at that. After dropping Lily at school, Ava drove across town to a quiet office building downtown. The brass sign outside read, Harrison and Cole Legal Associates Ava hadn't stepped inside the building in nearly 7 years. The receptionist looked up politely. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Harrison." Minutes later, an elderly lawyer entered the lobby and immediately recognized her. "Ava," he said gently, "I wondered if you'd ever come back." His office smelled like old books and coffee. Large shelves lined the walls, while sunlight spilled across stacks of legal files. Mr. Harrison sat across from her carefully. "So," he asked quietly, "what changed?" Ava took a deep breath. "My mother crossed a line with Lily." The lawyer nodded slowly, as if he already understood. "She still doesn't know about the property transfer, no." Mr. Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Your grandfather was very specific in his instructions," he said. "The estate legally transferred to you immediately after his death. Eleanor only remained there because you allowed it." Ava stared out the window. "I kept hoping she'd become someone different, and now—" Ava's expression hardened for the first time in years. "Now I'm done protecting her." Mr. Harrison opened a thick folder from his desk. "There's one more thing you should know," he said carefully. Ava looked up. "Your mother has been trying to refinance the mansion." Ava frowned. "What?" "She's drowning financially," he admitted. "The parties, the donations, the lifestyle, most of it was built on debt." Ava felt stunned. Eleanor spent years acting superior while secretly falling apart. "She can't refinance property she doesn't legally own," Ava said quietly. "Exactly," the lawyer replied. "Which means eventually the truth was going to surface anyway." For several moments Ava said nothing. Then slowly she looked at the papers in front of her, the deed, the ownership transfer, her grandfather's final gift. For years she viewed the documents as a burden. Now she saw them for what they truly were: protection. Not revenge, protection for herself, protection for Lily. Mr. Harrison studied her carefully. "What would you like to do?" Ava thought about Eleanor's birthday party. The expensive ballroom, the fake smiles, the humiliation Eleanor planned for Lily. Then she imagined her mother's face when the truth finally arrived. A calm chill spread through Ava's chest. "I think," she said softly, "it's time my mother learned that actions have consequences." The morning of Eleanor Bennett's 70th birthday arrived bright and flawless, as if the world itself had been carefully polished for her celebration. Inside the grand estate, staff moved quickly across marble floors, adjusting floral arrangements and polishing glass chandeliers until everything shimmered. The mansion looked like a magazine cover: gold accents, white roses, and crystal centerpieces reflecting sunlight in every direction. Eleanor stood in the main hall wearing an elegant silver gown, watching everything with satisfied eyes. "This needs to be perfect," she instructed sharply. "No mistakes tonight. Important guests are arriving." "Yes, Mrs. Bennett," the staff replied in unison. Eleanor smiled faintly at her reflection in a mirror. 70 years old, yet still powerful, still admired, still in control. At least that's what she believed. What she didn't know was that control had already slipped through her fingers. Across town, Alva sat quietly in her apartment while Lily got ready for school. The house felt strangely calm, like the stillness before a storm. "Mom," Lily asked while tying her shoes, "are we going to Grandma's party?" Alva paused. "No," she said gently. Lily looked down. "Did I do something wrong?" Alva knelt in front of her daughter immediately. "Listen to me. You did nothing wrong, not a single thing." Lily nodded slowly, but her eyes still carried confusion. Alva brushed her hair back softly. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt others. Tonight, I need to take care of something important." Lily studied her face. "Is it about Grandma?" Alva hesitated for only a second. Then she nodded. Yes, Lily didn't ask anything else. She simply hugged her mother tightly before leaving for school. And when the door closed behind her, Alva finally exhaled. It was time. By evening, the ballroom glittered with life. Music filled the air as guests arrived in designer suits and expensive dresses. Laughter echoed through the hall while waiters moved gracefully between tables carrying champagne. Cameras flashed as influential guests greeted Eleanor, praising her elegance and generosity. "Eleanor thrived in moments like this. This is incredible," one guest said. You've truly outdone yourself, Elinor. She smiled proudly. Oh, it's nothing, just a small gathering worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. She scanned the room, expecting everyone important to be present, but she noticed something missing. Ava wasn't there, and neither was Lily. Elinor's smile tightened slightly. She must be embarrassed, she muttered to herself. Good, at least she understood her place. The music rose again, and she pushed the thought away. Meanwhile, at exactly 8:12 p.m., the grand doors of the ballroom opened again. But this time it wasn't another guest. It was silence. Ava stepped inside alone, no gown, no jewelry. Just a simple dark coat and calm expression, head slowly turned. The room didn't understand her presence at first. Some guests whispered, trying to identify her. Then Elinor saw her. Her expression hardened instantly. Ava, she said loudly, forcing a polite smile. You finally came. I assumed you would avoid embarrassment. Ava didn't respond. She simply walked forward, the room quieted. Something about her calmness felt different, unfamiliar. She stopped at the center of the ballroom. I'm here, Ava said softly, because something needs to be corrected. Elinor laughed lightly. Corrected? Sweetheart, this is a birthday party, not one of your emotional outbursts. A few guests chuckled awkwardly. Ava slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. The laughter faded immediately. Elinor frowned. What is that? Ava looked directly at her mother. A reminder, she said quietly. Then she opened the envelope. Inside were official documents, legal stamps, property records. The entire room shifted as guests began sensing something serious unfolding. Elinor stepped forward. Stop this nonsense, whatever you think you're doing. Ava raised her hand slightly. No, she interrupted calmly. You've spent years deciding who belongs where. Tonight I'll show you where you actually stand. She placed the documents on a nearby table. A lawyer standing quietly near the entrance stepped forward. Mr. Harrison. Elinor's smile disappeared instantly. What is this? She demanded. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Bennet, he said carefully, I've been instructed to confirm legal ownership of the Bennet estate. A hush fell over the ballroom. Elinor's face tightened. There's no need for that. I own my home. Ava finally spoke again. No, Mom, she said softly, you don't. The words hit the room like thunder. Elinor stared at her daughter. Excuse me. Ava stepped closer, her voice steady but sharp. That house was transferred to me 7 years ago, legally, signed by Grandpa Walter, filed and approved. The room erupted into whispers. Elinor shook her head quickly. That's impossible. Mr. Harrison spoke again. It is fully documented and legally binding. Elinor's face turned pale for the first time that night. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're trying to humiliate me in front of my guests. Ava looked around the ballroom at the expensive decorations, the fake smiles, the people who never saw the truth. No, she said quietly. You did that yourself the moment you decided my daughter wasn't worthy of your love. A silence fell so heavy it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. Elinor's lips trembled slightly, and for the first time in her life, she had no words. The ballroom did not recover from that moment. Silence spread across the polished floor like spilled ink, swallowing every whisper, every breath, every piece of music that had once filled the air. Even the chandeliers seemed too bright, too exposed, as if the truth had stripped the room of its elegance. Elinor Bennet stood frozen in the center of it all. For the first time in decades, she didn't look powerful. She looked uncertain. That's not possible, she said again, but her voice lacked its earlier sharpness. This house is mine. I built this life. I earned it. Ava's expression remained calm. No, she replied gently. You maintained it. Grandpa Walter built the foundation, and he made a decision you never believed he had the right to make. Elinor's eyes darted toward Mr. Harrison. You're lying, she snapped. All of you are conspiring against me. Mr. Harrison opened the file once more, turning it so the nearest guests could see the official seal. There is no conspiracy, he said, only documentation. A few guests leaned forward, the legal stamps, the signatures, the dates, everything was real. Undeniable, the room shifted again, but this time it wasn't curiosity. It was distance. People began stepping back from Elena without even realizing it. Her carefully built image, the generous hostess, the respected matriarch, began to crack under the weight of truth. Alva watched her mother carefully, not with anger, but with a strange, calm sadness. "You always told me I didn't belong in your world," Alva said softly. "You were right." Eleanor's head snapped toward her. "Alva, but you forgot something," Alva continued. "This was never your world to begin with." A ripple moved through the guests. Eleanor's voice turned desperate. "This is about money, isn't it? You want control, you want revenge." Alva shook her head. "No," she said. "This is about Lily." At the mention of her granddaughter's name, Eleanor's expression faltered slightly. "She's a child," Eleanor muttered. "She doesn't understand social expectations." Alva took a slow breath. "She understands kindness," she said, "something you stopped practicing a long time ago." The words landed heavier than anything else that night. Eleanor looked around the ballroom, searching for support, for someone to interrupt, to defend her. But the faces she saw were no longer smiling. They were watching, evaluating, seeing her differently. And that realization hit harder than any legal document. "You're making a mistake," Eleanor said, weaker now. "This is my birthday. My family is here." Alva stepped closer, lowering her voice so only her mother could hear. "Family is not something you control," she said. "It's something you either nurture or lose." Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, she had no performance left to rely on. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat gently. "Legally speaking," he said, "ownership has already been transferred. Any further use of the property requires the consent of the current owner." A long pause followed. Then, slowly, Alva reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a second document. "This is your notice," she said. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. "Notice of what?" Alva met her eyes. "Vacate the property." Gasps spread across the ballroom. Eleanor took a step back as if physically struck. "You can't do that to me." "I already did," Alva replied. Something inside Eleanor finally broke, not loudly, but quietly, like a thread snapping under too much tension. "This is my home," she whispered, suddenly smaller than she had ever been. Alva looked at her for a long moment. Then she spoke with a softness that carried no cruelty, only truth. "No," she said, "it was never truly yours, you just lived in it." A heavy silence followed. Guests began to murmur again, but the tone had changed completely. The admiration Eleanor once commanded was gone, replaced by uncomfortable realization. Alva turned slightly, glancing around the ballroom one last time. Then her eyes softened, because she wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. She was thinking about Lily, about a little girl who had been told she didn't belong. And now, finally, she wouldn't have to grow up believing that. Alva looked back at her mother. "I didn't take anything from you tonight," she said quietly. "I simply stopped letting you take from us." Eleanor stood still, surrounded by people who no longer saw her the same way. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to lose control. Alva turned away from the ballroom, the deed still in her hand, and walked out into the night, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a mother choosing peace.